From a very young age, the pianist was different from other children. While other kids were playing games or learning to ride bicycles, he was drawn to the piano. He would sit for hours, his small fingers moving over the keys with a curiosity and skill that seemed beyond his age. The music seemed to flow through him naturally, as if the piano itself recognized that he belonged there. His parents noticed this early talent and decided to nurture it, introducing him to teachers who could help refine what already seemed like a gift from birth. At first, his practice sessions were playful. He loved exploring the piano, pressing keys in different sequences and listening to the sounds he could create. But over time, his approach became more disciplined. He was not content with simply playing the notes. He wanted to understand the emotion behind every piece, to feel it in a way that would allow him to convey it to others. The more he played, the more he realized how much depth music held, and this realization drove him to dedicate himself entirely to mastering his art. As he grew older, his talent became undeniable. Teachers, recognizing the rare quality of his skill, encouraged him to participate in local competitions. The first few were nerve-wracking. Sitting in front of judges and an audience, he felt his heart pound and his hands tremble. But when he began to play, something shifted. The anxiety melted away, replaced by a calm focus. Each note was precise. Each phrase carried emotion, and every performance left listeners amazed. His awards began to pile up, and word of his ability spread quickly through the local music community. By the time he reached his teenage years, his reputation had grown far beyond his small hometown. He started traveling to perform in different cities and even countries. Each concert brought new challenges, from unfamiliar pianos to large and intimidating audiences. Yet he handled each with grace. Critics started to write about him, praising not just his technical ability but the soul he poured into every performance. People began to call him a prodigy, a term he initially found both flattering and burdensome. Being labeled a prodigy came with expectations, and he felt the weight of every performance more keenly. Despite the accolades, he remained grounded. He spent long hours in practice rooms, not for recognition, but for the love of the music itself. He explored compositions from different eras and cultures, seeking to understand the vast world of piano music. This curiosity and dedication made him versatile. He could perform a complex classical piece with flawless technique one day and bring a simple, gentle melody to life the next. Audiences began to notice this rare combination of skill and feeling. It was not just that he could play notes. It was that he made the piano speak, tell stories, and evoke emotions that lingered long after the final chord faded. His personal life, however, became secondary. Friends often invited him to social events, but he would politely decline, choosing instead to stay at the piano. He felt a deep connection to music that he could not ignore. Teachers sometimes reminded him to take breaks, but he rarely listened. The world outside the music seemed distant and less important compared to the universe he found in each composition. By the time he was in his late teens, he had performed in prestigious halls and earned recognition from renowned musicians. His face appeared in magazines and newspapers, always accompanied by praise for his extraordinary talent. Teachers who once mentored him now spoke of him as a peer, someone whose understanding of music rivaled even seasoned professionals. Audiences would travel long distances just to hear him play. In every city he visited, he left an impression that was impossible to forget. What made him stand out, even more than his technical skill, was his ability to interpret music. He did not just play what was written on the page, he brought the notes to life. A single phrase could make listeners feel joy, sadness, or wonder. Critics often remarked on the depth and maturity in his playing, something rarely seen in someone so young. He had learned to listen carefully, not just to the music, but to the silence between notes. That silence, he believed, was just as important as the sound. It allowed the emotion to breathe and gave the audience space to feel. Teachers, critics, and audiences alike began to speak of him not merely as a talented pianist, but as one of the greatest pianists of his generation. His rise to fame seemed unstoppable. Invitations poured in from orchestras and festivals around the world. Every new opportunity further solidified his growing reputation. Yet he remained surprisingly humble. He never considered himself superior to others. He believed his talent was a responsibility as much as a gift, something to be nurtured and shared. Despite this humility, the pressure was constant. The world expected him to perform flawlessly every time, and the label of being the greatest carried weight. Even small mistakes were magnified in public discourse. Yet he accepted this challenge willingly. The piano had given him a voice, a way to communicate emotions that words could never fully capture. It was worth every moment of stress, every long hour of practice, and every sacrifice in his personal life. By now, he had developed a fan following that was as devoted as it was diverse. Music lovers of all ages celebrated his performances. Children would mimic his favorite pieces, aspiring to reach his level, while seasoned musicians admired his precision and emotional depth. Interviews and television appearances allowed him to share his journey, inspiring countless others to pursue their passions with the same dedication. Yet, even with fame, he always returned to the same simple truth. The music came first and everything else followed. As he prepared for each new performance, he carried the memory of his first days at the piano, the wonder, the curiosity, and the joy of creating music. That foundation kept him grounded and reminded him why he had begun this journey in the first place. His rise to fame was not just about skill or accolades. It was about a lifelong devotion to music and a desire to touch the hearts of those who listened. This was the story of a young pianist, known far and wide as the greatest of his time, whose journey had only just begun, setting the stage for the challenges and revelations that would soon follow. As the pianist's fame grew, so did the weight of expectation. Audiences expected perfection, and critics scrutinized every nuance of his performance. Even a slight hesitation or a soft misstep would be magnified in reviews, and the praise that once felt so natural now came with a silent pressure. Every concert became a test not just of skill, but of endurance, focus, and emotional resilience. He found himself constantly thinking about the next performance, analyzing every note he played, and wondering if it was enough. Behind closed doors, the pianist was not always as confident as the public imagined. Hours of practice turned into a kind of obsession. Even in the middle of the night, he could be found at the piano, running through scales and passages again and again until they felt flawless. The music that once brought pure joy now carried an edge of anxiety. He feared making a mistake more than anything else. Even when rehearsals went well, he would imagine worst-case scenarios in his mind, picturing himself slipping on stage or missing a note in front of thousands. The fear of failure became a constant companion, one that followed him from home to concert hall to hotel room. His personal life began to shrink as a result. Invitations to dinners, gatherings, or casual meetups were often declined. Friends worried that he was becoming isolated, but he could not bring himself to step away from the piano for long. Music was his world, and he felt that any time away from it was time wasted. Teachers occasionally reminded him to rest and take care of himself, but their advice often fell on deaf ears. He believed that every hour spent at the piano brought him closer to perfection and closer to maintaining the image of the greatest pianist in the world. Despite the pressure, there were moments of pure beauty and inspiration. Sometimes, when playing a particularly emotional piece, he would feel completely absorbed, as if the world outside the room had disappeared. Those moments reminded him why he had started playing the piano as a child and why he loved it so deeply. They were rare pockets of peace amidst the constant tension and expectation. In those moments, he felt connected to something larger than himself, something timeless and universal. Yet, those moments were fleeting, and soon the pressures of reputation and upcoming performances returned. Critics and fans continued to elevate his status, writing glowing reviews and praising his technical skill and emotional depth. These accolades were both rewarding and burdensome. Each new article or interview added to the weight of expectation, as if the world were waiting for him to prove again and again that he was indeed the greatest. The praise that once felt like a natural acknowledgement of talent now felt like a chain, binding him to an ever higher standard that he could never quite escape. Travel became a constant part of life. Concerts in different cities and countries demanded hours on planes and trains, often leaving little time for rest. Each new venue presented its own challenges. Unfamiliar pianos, different acoustics, varying audience energy. Even seasoned musicians would struggle with such variables, but for him, the pressure was amplified by his reputation. Each performance had to be flawless, each note perfect, and each emotion conveyed with precision. The joy of discovery that once came with performing in new spaces was often overshadowed by worry and self-doubt. Relationships were difficult to maintain. Friends and family, while supportive, struggled to understand the intense world he inhabited. Conversations often revolved around his performances, and while they wanted to share in his successes, he sometimes felt that his life was reduced to his talent alone. Emotional connections became complicated, as he found it difficult to step out of the persona the world had built around him. At times, he longed for simple, human interaction uncolored by expectations, but such moments were rare. Even the smallest mistakes in rehearsal could spiral into deep self-criticism. He would replay the same passage countless times, dissecting each note, each movement of his fingers, and each subtle shift in tempo. This rigorous self-analysis sharpened his skill but also increased his anxiety. He began to measure his self-worth not by personal happiness or growth, but by public approval and technical precision. The pressure was invisible to outsiders, but it weighed heavily on him. Each performance was not just a concert. It was a test of identity, a public proof of his place at the pinnacle of the piano world. Teachers who had once marveled at his talent now watched him with concern. They admired his dedication but worried about the toll it was taking on his mental and emotional well-being. They encouraged him to take breaks, to step back, and to remember the joy that music had once brought. Occasionally, he would follow their advice for a short time, but the pull of the piano and the fear of letting down the audience was too strong. The cycle of practice, performance, and self-criticism continued relentlessly. Despite the stress, he was still capable of moments of extraordinary artistry. During certain performances, when he was completely absorbed, the piano seemed to sing under his fingers. Critics would describe these moments as transcendent, as if he was speaking directly to the soul of the audience. It was in these rare instances that he remembered why he had begun this journey and why he had devoted so much of his life to music. The audience could feel the vulnerability behind the perfection, the human being behind the prodigy. These moments reminded him that even amidst pressure and fear, music was still a language of connection and emotion. But the pressure was not just external. Internally, he pushed himself harder than anyone else could. He scrutinized recordings of his own performances, comparing them to those of other musicians, always striving for improvement. Every minor imperfection became a lesson, every applause a challenge to maintain the standard. The pursuit of greatness became both a passion and a burden. Sleep, meals, and leisure all became secondary to the relentless drive to master his craft. As the years went on, the pattern remained the same. Every concert was both a triumph and a test. Every review both validation and a reminder of the ever-present expectations. Audiences and critics continued to praise him as the greatest pianist of his generation. Yet he carried a quiet, private anxiety that few could see. The weight of fame, the pressure to maintain perfection, and the desire to connect emotionally through music created a complex mix of pride, fear, and relentless dedication. Even in moments of solitude, the music never stopped in his mind. He would imagine performing, rehearse in his head, and relive past concerts. The piano had become an extension of himself, and the fear of failure was always close by. Yet, through all of this, he remained committed to his art. He accepted that the life of a musician at the top was not easy, but he believed that the reward, the ability to move hearts and touch lives with music, was worth every sacrifice. This period of his life was defined by the delicate balance between extraordinary talent and the immense pressure that accompanied it. It was a time of growth, introspection, and struggle. The pianist learned more about himself than any lesson in technique could teach. He discovered resilience, focus, and the weight of expectation. He understood the fragility of public acclaim and the fragility of his own confidence. Through it all, he remained determined to honor his gift, knowing that the path of a great artist was never simple, but always deeply human. The announcement of the upcoming international concert brought both excitement and a new wave of tension for the pianist. This was not just any performance. It was to be held in one of the world's most prestigious concert halls, a stage where history had been made by the greatest musicians. The audience would consist of critics, fellow artists, and devoted fans who had followed his career for years. It was a moment that could either further solidify his reputation or expose the vulnerabilities he had kept hidden. The weight of this realization rested heavily on his shoulders. In the weeks leading up to the performance, he immersed himself in preparation. Hours in the practice room turned into entire days of refinement. He repeated scales, studied complex passages, and explored the emotional depth of each composition. Every note mattered. Every subtle shift in tempo could alter the story the music was telling. He was determined to deliver a performance that would not only demonstrate his technical mastery, but also convey the profound emotions that lay beneath each piece. Rehearsals were both exhilarating and exhausting. Each session revealed new layers of the music, and he became increasingly aware of the responsibility that came with playing on such a significant stage. Occasionally, he would pause, his hands hovering over the keys, and take a deep breath, feeling the weight of anticipation. The piano had always been a source of joy, but now it carried the heavy burden of expectation. Every chord he played was a step toward either triumph or potential disappointment. Despite his focus, moments of doubt crept in. He would imagine the audience, thousands of eyes fixed on him, and feel a knot tighten in his stomach. He questioned whether he could meet the standard he had set for himself, whether he could live up to the title of the greatest pianist. Sleep was sometimes elusive, and even when he rested, his mind replayed performances, analyzing every detail and imagining possible mistakes. The pressure was unlike anything he had experienced before, yet he refused to let it overwhelm him completely. As the day of the concert approached, the pianist traveled to the city where the hall was located. The space was breathtaking, with high ceilings, ornate details, and acoustics designed to carry even the softest note across the entire audience. He spent time exploring the hall, familiarizing himself with the piano and the environment. Every detail mattered: the height of the piano, the feel of the keys, the spacing of the pedals. He wanted to be ready for every possibility, to ensure that nothing would distract him from the music once the performance began. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Technicians adjusted lights and sound, stagehands moved equipment with precise timing, and other performers ran through last-minute preparations. The pianist sat quietly, his hands resting lightly on the keys of the grand piano in the wings. He closed his eyes, visualizing the concert, imagining the flow of each piece and the emotional journey he intended to take the audience on. In this quiet moment, he tried to center himself, to transform anxiety into focus and energy. The audience began to fill the hall, the low hum of conversation blending with the anticipatory silence of those eager to witness a historic performance. The pianist took a deep breath and reminded himself that music had always been his sanctuary, the place where he could communicate without words. He focused on the emotion behind each note, remembering the joy and wonder that had first drawn him to the piano. The hall was grand, the pressure immense, but he felt a flicker of calm amid the storm of expectation. When it was time to begin, the pianist walked onto the stage, acknowledging the audience with a small nod. The applause was warm and appreciative, yet beneath it was an undercurrent of scrutiny. Every eye in the hall was on him. He took a final breath and sat at the piano, his fingers poised over the keys. The first notes sounded delicate and precise, filling the hall with a sense of anticipation and beauty. The audience leaned in, captivated by the mastery they had come to expect. As the performance continued, he felt himself moving through the music with a combination of technical skill and emotional expression that had become his signature. Each passage carried the story of the composer, and he added his own voice to it, interpreting the piece in a way that was uniquely his. The audience responded instinctively, their focus entirely on the sound, the silence, and the spaces in between. It was a moment of connection that transcended language, where every heart in the hall was touched by the music. Yet, beneath the surface of excellence, tension lingered. The pianist was acutely aware of every minor detail, every tiny shift in tempo, every nuance of touch. A fleeting hesitation in a complex passage would make him pause internally, questioning whether he could maintain the flawless execution he demanded of himself. The balance between artistry and perfection was delicate, and even the most experienced performer could feel it tipping under the weight of expectation. The hall was beautiful, the audience eager, and the music demanding, all at once. Despite these internal challenges, he pressed on, fully committed to the journey he had planned. He moved seamlessly from one section to the next, his fingers dancing across the keys, translating emotion into sound. The hall seemed to vibrate with the intensity of his playing, carrying every note to the farthest corner of the space. He felt moments of pure transcendence, where technique and emotion aligned perfectly, allowing him to lose himself in the music and experience the performance as both artist and listener. The audience was mesmerized, sensing the depth of focus and feeling behind every note. Critics and fans alike leaned forward, captivated by the combination of skill and vulnerability that the pianist displayed. It was as if the music had a life of its own, guiding the performance while he became a conduit through which it flowed. The tension that had built in the days leading up to the concert melted into a single, powerful expression of artistry. Backstage, colleagues and assistants observed the performance with admiration and awe. They understood the preparation, the sacrifices, and the emotional investment that had brought this moment to life. Every gesture, every subtle shift in tempo, and every pause was deliberate, contributing to a performance that felt both precise and spontaneous. It was a delicate balance that few could achieve, yet he seemed to navigate it effortlessly, even as the pressure continued to weigh on him. As the final piece approached, the pianist felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. The conclusion required both technical mastery and emotional resonance, and he poured everything he had into those final measures. The notes rang out, filling the hall with a sense of closure, triumph, and reflection. When the last chord faded, there was a moment of silence, a collective breath held by everyone in the room. Then, the applause erupted, thunderous and unrestrained, a testament to the power and beauty of the performance. In that moment, the pianist felt a fleeting sense of liberation. The pressure, the anxiety, and the anticipation were temporarily suspended. He had delivered the performance he had envisioned, shared his deepest emotions through the music, and connected with an audience in a way that only great art can achieve. Yet, even as the applause washed over him, he knew that the journey was far from over. The expectations would continue, and the next performance would bring new challenges and scrutiny. Despite the momentary triumph, he reflected quietly on the complexity of his experience. The concert had been a success, yet it had also revealed the fragile nature of his craft, the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface of perfection. The pianist understood that mastery was not simply about skill, but about resilience, focus, and the ability to embrace both the beauty and the pressure inherent in performing at the highest level. It was a lesson that would stay with him as he continued to navigate the intricate world of music, reputation, and personal growth. The performance became a defining moment in his career, one that was celebrated and remembered by audiences and critics alike. Yet, it also marked the beginning of a new phase, one where the pressures and expectations would intensify, and where the pianist would face challenges that went beyond technique and talent. The anticipation, preparation, and execution of this performance had tested him in ways he had never experienced before, preparing him for the next chapter of his story, where both triumph and adversity awaited. The performance began with all the precision, emotion, and focus that the pianist had cultivated over months of preparation. Every note was deliberate, every phrase carefully interpreted. The audience was captivated, completely absorbed in the music, as if the concert hall had transformed into a private world shared only between the pianist and those listening. It was a moment that seemed to confirm his reputation as the greatest, a display of mastery that left no room for doubt. But as the concert progressed, something unexpected happened. During a particularly complex and fast passage, his fingers hesitated, just for a split second. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to break the seamless flow he had worked so hard to maintain. In that instant, a ripple of tension passed through him. His mind, usually so controlled and focused, began to falter. He felt the weight of thousands of eyes and ears in the hall, all expecting perfection, pressing down on him with an intensity he had never felt before. The pianist tried to recover immediately, his fingers moving across the keys with renewed focus. But the small hesitation had unsettled him more than he realized. For a few moments, the music felt foreign, the notes not quite responding as they had in rehearsal. Panic began to creep in, a feeling he had rarely experienced in public. The audience, still engaged, could sense a subtle shift, though they could not yet understand what was happening. For the pianist, every second felt elongated, each note a test of control and composure. He pushed forward, attempting to regain his usual rhythm and emotional connection. Yet, the pressure compounded. He began to question his choices, second-guessing fingering and phrasing he had executed perfectly countless times before. The complexity of the piece, which he had once embraced as a challenge, now seemed daunting in the live moment. The connection he usually felt with the music was disrupted, and he had to consciously remind himself to breathe, to slow down, to trust his instincts. The audience remained largely unaware of the internal struggle, though some noticed the slight irregularity in tempo. Critics in the front rows furrowed their brows, taking mental notes, while other listeners continued to enjoy the performance, perhaps unaware of the subtle tension building beneath the surface. The pianist, however, felt every eye, every expectation, every heartbeat in the room pressing against him. It was a moment of vulnerability, a reminder that even the greatest could stumble under the weight of perfection. As he moved into the next section of the performance, he encountered another challenge. A rapid series of chords, which in rehearsal had felt effortless, now required intense concentration to execute. Each chord demanded full mental and physical coordination, and the tiniest misstep threatened to unravel the flow entirely. His hands shook slightly, a rare and unwelcome occurrence. The music that usually brought him joy now felt like a minefield, each note a potential hazard. The pianist felt the enormity of the moment pressing down on him, a combination of personal expectation, public scrutiny, and the complexity of the composition itself. In an attempt to regain control, he slowed the tempo slightly, focusing on clarity over speed. He reminded himself that music was not just about technical skill but about communication, about connecting with the audience emotionally. By centering himself, he was able to navigate the passage more carefully, but the previous hesitation lingered in his mind. Doubts crept in, whispering that perhaps his reputation had been overstated, that perhaps he was not as infallible as the world believed. The pianist's internal dialogue grew more intense as the performance continued. He thought about the years of training, the sacrifices he had made, the countless hours of practice. Each memory of success now carried the added pressure of expectation. He had always performed with precision, but now he realized that perfection was an ever-shifting target, one that became more elusive the higher he climbed. The small falter in this concert, which might have been insignificant under different circumstances, now loomed large in his mind. Despite these challenges, he continued to play, determined to complete the performance. His technical skill remained formidable, and he was able to execute most passages flawlessly. Yet, the emotional connection that had once seemed effortless required constant, conscious effort. He had to fight against his own self-doubt, to remind himself why he played music in the first place, and to focus on the experience of the audience rather than the internal critic that had taken over. The audience, meanwhile, remained largely captivated. Many were unaware of the small errors, instead absorbed in the sweeping melodies and intricate harmonies. The hall seemed to vibrate with the energy of the performance, the pianist's dedication evident in every movement. Yet, for those who listened closely, the subtle falter and hesitation were noticeable. Critics scribbled notes, and whispers of uncertainty began to circulate among a few audience members. The once unquestioned image of the greatest pianist was subtly challenged, though the full significance of the moment would only become clear later. As the final sections of the concert approached, the pianist faced the most demanding passages. He drew upon every ounce of concentration and emotional resilience to carry him through. The music demanded both technical mastery and expressive depth, requiring him to navigate the piece with precision while also conveying the intended emotion. It was a delicate balance, one that required him to suppress his fear and doubt and immerse himself fully in the music. His fingers moved with skill, his body swayed with the rhythm, and his mind focused entirely on the notes and the story they told. Yet, even as he completed the final chords, a lingering awareness remained. He knew that the falter earlier had not gone unnoticed by some, and he wondered how it would be perceived. Would it be seen as a minor hiccup, or would it cast doubt on his reputation? The applause that followed was enthusiastic, yet a subtle undercurrent of tension had entered the room. The concert was technically impressive, emotionally compelling, and yet marked by the human vulnerability that had momentarily surfaced. Backstage, the pianist felt a mix of relief, exhaustion, and apprehension. He had completed the performance, shared his artistry with the world, and navigated the unexpected challenge. Yet, he could not shake the awareness that his image as the flawless, untouchable pianist had been subtly questioned. Colleagues and assistants offered congratulations, but he felt an internal reckoning, a need to confront the fragility of even the greatest talent when faced with immense pressure. The aftermath of the concert would later reveal the impact of that single falter. Critics wrote reviews that praised the performance overall but noted the minor imperfections, analyzing the moment with precision. Discussions circulated among music enthusiasts, some defending his artistry, others highlighting the vulnerability. Social media amplified the conversation, and the moment became a focal point for debate. The pianist, while still celebrated, realized that the world had witnessed not just his skill but also his humanity. For the first time in his career, he experienced a profound sense of self-reflection. The concert had tested not only his technical ability but also his resilience, focus, and emotional composure. It revealed that even the most prepared and talented could falter under pressure, and that public perception could shift in an instant. He felt a mixture of humility and determination, recognizing that this challenge was an opportunity to grow, to understand the delicate balance between perfection and human vulnerability, and to explore how to navigate future performances with both skill and emotional depth. This unexpected turn during the performance marked a pivotal moment in his journey. It challenged the long-held assumption of flawless mastery and introduced a new layer of complexity to his relationship with music, fame, and personal expectation. The pianist understood that greatness was not solely defined by technical perfection but by the ability to persist, to connect, and to express humanity even in moments of uncertainty. The experience would shape him profoundly, preparing him for the trials, reflections, and eventual growth that lay ahead in the next chapters of his story. The days following the performance were a whirlwind of emotion and reflection for the pianist. He had returned home, physically exhausted but mentally restless. Sleep did not come easily, and when it did, it was punctuated by dreams in which he replayed the concert, each note and gesture dissected endlessly. The momentary falter, the hesitation that had seemed so small in the flow of music, now weighed heavily on his mind. It was as if the applause and accolades he received were distant echoes compared to the internal scrutiny he imposed on himself. He read reviews with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Most praised the overall quality of the performance, highlighting his technical mastery and emotional depth. Yet, a few noted the slight hesitation, the rare break in rhythm, and the subtle uncertainty in a passage that had been flawless countless times before. These mentions, though minor, resonated deeply with him. What others might have considered trivial became, in his mind, a reminder that even the greatest were fallible. It was the first time he felt truly exposed, the first time that perfection seemed an impossible expectation. Fans sent messages of support, praising his artistry and expressing admiration for the emotional power of the performance. Yet, even amidst this encouragement, he could not shake a sense of unease. The praise was comforting, but it did not erase the memory of the moment when control had slipped. Friends and colleagues reached out, offering reassurance and encouragement, reminding him that everyone, no matter how skilled, could experience a lapse. Still, the pianist felt a profound need to confront the falter within himself, to understand what it revealed about his limits, his fears, and his humanity. He spent long hours alone at the piano, revisiting the pieces from the concert. He replayed the passage where the hesitation occurred, analyzing every note, every movement of his fingers, and every thought that had passed through his mind. This introspection was both painful and enlightening. He realized that the falter had not been a simple technical error. It was a reflection of accumulated pressure, fatigue, and the weight of expectation. In this moment of clarity, he began to understand that perfection was not merely about flawless execution but about the courage to continue despite imperfection. The pianist also reflected on the emotional toll of his career thus far. Years of intense practice, constant travel, and relentless pursuit of excellence had shaped him into the musician he was, but they had also created a fragile space in which fear could grow unchecked. He thought about the sacrifices he had made, the personal connections that had been delayed or left behind, and the quiet moments of joy that had been eclipsed by pressure and self-doubt. The falter, though public and brief, had illuminated the human side of a life that often appeared untouchable. Interviews and public appearances in the aftermath of the concert were challenging. Reporters asked questions about the performance, some praising, some probing. Each answer required careful thought, as he sought to convey honesty without diminishing his artistry. He spoke of his love for music, his dedication to continual growth, and the importance of embracing vulnerability in art. His words resonated with many, revealing a depth beyond technical skill and hinting at the resilience that allowed him to navigate both triumph and challenge. Within the music community, discussions arose about the nature of performance and the expectations placed on top artists. Fellow musicians shared their own experiences with falters and public scrutiny, creating a network of understanding and shared humanity. The pianist realized that even the most celebrated artists had moments of doubt, mistakes, and challenges. This awareness offered some comfort, though it did not erase the lingering impact of the concert. It became clear that greatness was intertwined with vulnerability, and that true mastery required not only skill but also the courage to confront imperfection. As days turned into weeks, the pianist began to shift his focus from fear and self-criticism to learning and growth. He experimented with different interpretations of the pieces, exploring how slight adjustments could change the emotional resonance of the music. He discovered that embracing imperfections allowed him to communicate more honestly, to connect more deeply with audiences, and to find a renewed sense of joy in performance. Music, he realized, was not solely about achieving technical perfection. It was about storytelling, emotion, and human connection. Personal relationships, too, gained new significance. Friends and mentors offered support, shared experiences, and gentle reminders that he was more than the sum of his achievements. Family reached out with warmth, emphasizing the importance of balance and the beauty of moments outside the concert hall. The pianist began to recognize that life, like music, was composed of both triumphs and vulnerabilities, each essential to creating a full, rich experience. This understanding became a cornerstone of his recovery from the emotional impact of the performance. The pianist also explored mindfulness and reflection as tools to manage the pressure that had previously seemed unrelenting. He practiced focusing on the present moment, allowing himself to play without judgment, and observing thoughts and feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. These practices helped him rebuild confidence, reduce anxiety, and approach music with renewed clarity. He learned that resilience was not the absence of fear or mistake but the ability to continue, to adapt, and to grow stronger through challenges. Over time, he returned to performing, bringing a new perspective to the stage. Audiences noticed a subtle shift. While technical mastery remained, there was a deeper emotional authenticity in each performance. He allowed himself to be more present, more human, and more vulnerable, which in turn strengthened the connection with listeners. The falter that had once seemed catastrophic became a turning point, a moment that transformed not only his approach to music but also his understanding of himself. Critics and fans alike began to see the pianist in a new light. Discussions of his performances now included recognition of the emotional depth and authenticity that emerged from vulnerability. He was still admired for technical brilliance, but there was a newfound respect for the courage to confront imperfection openly. The experience demonstrated that artistry was not defined solely by flawless execution but by the ability to communicate, to endure, and to grow through both success and challenge. In the quiet moments, away from the stage and audience, the pianist reflected on the lessons learned. The concert, once a source of intense anxiety and self-criticism, had become a catalyst for personal and professional growth. He embraced the idea that mistakes were not failures but opportunities to deepen understanding, refine technique, and strengthen emotional connection. The falter had been a harsh but valuable teacher, revealing the importance of resilience, self-compassion, and the humanity that underlies true artistry. As the months passed, the pianist continued to perform and explore music with renewed vigor. He carried with him the lessons of the concert, integrating them into practice, performance, and daily life. The experience had reshaped his understanding of greatness, showing that it was not about being infallible but about persevering, learning, and connecting with others through shared emotion. He approached each new opportunity with a balance of dedication and acceptance, honoring both his talent and his humanity. The aftermath of the faltered performance became a defining chapter in his career. It revealed the fragility and strength of a life devoted to art, the pressures of public expectation, and the resilience required to navigate both. The pianist learned to embrace vulnerability as a source of strength, to see mistakes as part of growth, and to find joy in music beyond perfection. This period of reflection and adaptation prepared him for future challenges and successes, shaping not only his artistry but his understanding of himself as a human being and musician. After months of reflection, preparation, and personal growth, the pianist felt ready to return to the stage in a way he had not experienced before. He approached this next performance not with the sole aim of perfection, but with a desire to communicate, to connect, and to embrace the human essence of music. The lessons of the past, the falter, the anxiety, the weight of expectation had transformed him. He understood that greatness was not simply a label to maintain, but a journey of resilience, authenticity, and emotional depth. As he entered the concert hall, the pianist felt a sense of calm he had rarely known. The space was familiar yet alive with anticipation, and the audience, while eager, did not carry the judgmental scrutiny of past performances. He acknowledged them with a small nod, taking a deep breath and centering himself. In this moment, he realized that the music was not about him, but about the shared experience, the dialogue between artist and listener that transcended words. The piano awaited, keys gleaming under the soft lights, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The first notes were gentle, deliberate, and full of emotion. He allowed himself to feel the music rather than control it obsessively. Each phrase flowed naturally, each chord resonated with intention and feeling. Unlike before, he did not chase perfection or fear the slightest mistake. Instead, he embraced the possibility of imperfection as part of the narrative. The audience could sense this shift immediately, a subtle but powerful energy that made the performance feel alive and authentic. The hall seemed to breathe with the music, every listener attuned to the emotion and story being told. Throughout the concert, the pianist explored dynamics and phrasing with newfound freedom. Technical mastery remained, but it was now accompanied by a vulnerability that made the performance more profound. When a particularly challenging passage arrived, he played it with focus but without tension. He trusted his skill and allowed himself to be present in the moment. The earlier falter was a distant memory, replaced by the confidence that came from understanding both his talent and his human limitations. Every note carried honesty, every pause held meaning, and the connection with the audience deepened with each phrase. In the middle of the performance, he allowed himself to improvise subtly, a personal expression within the structure of the piece. This spontaneity added a new dimension, making the music feel fresh and alive. The audience was captivated, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary, not only in terms of technical brilliance, but in the raw emotional truth being conveyed. The pianist had learned that music is not simply a series of notes to be executed flawlessly, but a living language of emotion, vulnerability, and connection. As the concert progressed, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Every early practice session, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice had led to this deeper understanding. The falter that once haunted him was now a teacher, guiding him toward a more holistic approach to performance. He realized that mistakes were not the end of greatness, but part of the human experience that made artistry meaningful. This insight allowed him to play with confidence and joy, free from the self-imposed pressure that had once threatened to overwhelm him. The audience responded with enthusiasm, but it was not just applause. They felt the sincerity, the honesty, and the courage that defined this performance. Listeners were moved not only by the technical skill but by the emotional journey woven into every note. Critics and colleagues later described the concert as transformative, noting how the pianist had embraced vulnerability and conveyed profound emotion. It was a moment that transcended reputation, titles, and expectation, focusing instead on the true essence of art, the ability to touch hearts and communicate deeply. Backstage after the concert, the pianist felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The exhilaration of performance was accompanied by a quiet satisfaction that went beyond external recognition. He knew that he had performed with integrity, that he had connected authentically with the audience, and that he had embraced both his skill and his humanity. The journey had come full circle, from early talent, to fame, to falter, to reflection, and now to a mature, deeply expressive artistry. In the days that followed, he received messages and praise from around the world. People spoke not only of the technical brilliance, but of the emotional power and authenticity of the performance. He realized that audiences responded most strongly to honesty and vulnerability, that it was these qualities that left lasting impressions. The concert had redefined what it meant to be a great pianist in his own eyes. Not someone untouchable, but someone willing to share the human experience through music. The pianist also began to share these insights with students and younger musicians. He spoke of the importance of practice, of dedication, and of technical skill, but he emphasized equally the need to embrace vulnerability, to understand that mistakes are part of growth, and to connect emotionally with both the music and the audience. He encouraged them to see performance as a dialogue rather than a test, and to find joy in both the discipline and the expression of their art. In private moments, he reflected on the transformation within himself. The journey had not been easy. It had demanded courage, humility, and self-compassion. Yet, it had allowed him to grow beyond the narrow confines of perfectionism, to develop resilience, and to experience the deeper fulfillment that comes from authentic expression. He understood now that the label of Greatest Pianist was less important than the journey of growth, the connection with others, and the ability to embrace the full human experience in music. As he continued to perform, the pianist approached each concert with a balanced perspective. He remained dedicated to technical excellence but paired it with emotional honesty. He allowed himself to make minor mistakes without fear, using them as opportunities to engage more deeply with the music and the audience. Each performance became a conversation, a shared experience, and a testament to the beauty of imperfection and the courage to express oneself fully. This chapter of his life became a defining moment, not for a single performance, but for the transformation it inspired. He had learned to integrate skill, emotion, vulnerability, and resilience, creating a new standard of artistry that was human, relatable, and deeply moving. Audiences and critics alike recognized this shift, acknowledging that greatness was not about flawlessness, but about the courage to embrace humanity within artistry. Ultimately, the pianist's journey taught him that music is a living, evolving experience. It is not confined to the perfection of execution, but enriched by the depth of emotion, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the connection between performer and listener. He had discovered that true mastery was not just about playing the right notes, but about touching lives, expressing truth, and inspiring others through both skill and authenticity. The pianist continued to perform, each concert a testament to the lessons learned from his journey. The experience of faltering, reflecting, and growing allowed him to play with a freedom, honesty, and emotional depth that was previously unattainable. He had transformed not only as an artist but as a human being, embracing imperfection, vulnerability, and connection as the true markers of greatness. His story became an inspiration, demonstrating that even the most celebrated artists can face challenges, learn from them, and emerge stronger, wiser, and more human than ever before.